Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet of 9 billion people by 2050, how we're going to be able to provide all the basic things that they need, the power, the water, the food, fuel, fiber, all those things that are needed, plus the education, healthcare, and jobs, of course. And we have someone sitting right beside me who is the expert in all those different areas, having traveled, lived around the world. This is Sarah Gammage. She is a Director of Gender, Economic Empowerment, and Livelihoods. This is the International Center for Research in Women, ICRW. And Sarah, welcome to Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about your organization and some of the goals and missions that you have, and then we'll start talking about this very broad topic, all this empowerment, gender, and livelihoods.
Well, ICRW is a research organization, and we do research on gender equality with this idea that we can provide evidence and information and data, and we can work collaboratively with partner organizations to really push a gender equality agenda forward. And we work in this policy sphere, and we work also with programs. So we also do sort of collaborations, we do monitoring and evaluation, we look at best practices, and we try to get them out there.
Well, the whole thing about it, I understand you have over 600 of these projects that you've been involved in one way or another, and of course we're talking about the African continent specifically, but also you've done things in Latin America, the South Pacific, Eastern Europe, so you have a very broad brush as far as the world that you're looking at. But looking at the African continent, 54 countries, very diverse as far as socioeconomic, education, religion, natural resources within those areas. So under your title as the director for all these many things, how do you make all that work and balance all of that so that you're working with women and the youth in many different areas, but also the livelihoods and entrepreneurship, if we can use that as a broad brush? Well,
we're a very broad organization, as you've noted. We have headquarters in India. We have an office also in Kampala in Uganda, and we have the office in DC. And we work collaboratively with our partner organizations on a variety of different issues, from health to education to analyzing what works in terms of job training and skills development. So we really work in a way that's very holistic. We draw on people from entirely different backgrounds, and we think very much about what are the solutions that can be organically identified by communities that we can support in ways that can really expand women's opportunities and livelihoods.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and that's one of the things that we really try to focus on, is to have at least 50% of our guests here that are female. And because when you get into many of these countries, you look at the small businesses, it could be as high as 80-85% are actually controlled and run by the women. So they really in many ways are the backbone of a lot of economies as far as these emerging market nations. So looking at this combination, the gender, but also you've really been looking at energy, renewables, and that sphere, but also environmental protection. So combining all that and still have the economic impact. How do you do that? So protect the environment, but also allow people to be able to feed their families and send their kids to school.
Well, I think you have to engage with the communities and the people who want to change their opportunities and they want to change their livelihoods. I think this is something that you work lockstep with the people who have their own solutions and can really make claims on different types of institutions and organizations to really move those forward. But I think we got into gender and energy through improved fuel wood stoves in the 90s, looking at ways to improve cooking, because we know that there are about 3 billion households out there that don't have secure energy, they don't have safe energy. So what you really need to do is find a solution that works for these households, but in ways that really builds on their skill sets and reflects their needs. And as you say, doesn't undermine their livelihoods. So from some of the work on improved fuel wood stoves, we started to build relationships to groups like the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves and Solar Sister, who you will hear about later on. And these are organizations that are working to improve cooking and improve the types of stoves and energy access that community have, particularly in rural areas, which is critical. Because if you want safe, clean cooking opportunities, you're going to have to start thinking beyond kerosene and beyond fuel wood. And so this is where we got into gender and energy. But it's not just about micro solutions, it's also about further up the value chain. How can communities make claims on their governments for better energy solutions and ones that are more compatible with their ecosystems and their livelihoods? You know, what kinds of microgrids are there that could be out there being used that can be governed by communities, where they talk about what pricing is and what the distribution should be and who has access to it?
Yeah, this whole thing about distributed energy, this is something we're working on in downtown Washington, D.C. and Ward 8, because you have many communities, just because they have access to the grid doesn't mean they can afford it. And if you don't have proper housing, you don't have proper weatherization and all these other things going on, you can have high-end affluent communities, but that doesn't mean everybody fits in socioeconomically in that whole thing. What are some of the key issues that you find when you're balancing this gender, the environment, and also energy?
Well, I think you really need to work with the communities to devise the kinds of solutions that are appropriate. But one of the key pieces of the work that we do globally is recognizing, reducing, and redistributing unpaid work. Women across the globe do most of the household maintenance and an awful lot of unpaid work. And what you really want to do is reduce the drudgery. Because if you're spending 3 to 5 hours a day gathering fuel wood and hauling water, what other opportunities do you have to learn, to try different job skills, to try different types of livelihood activities? And the drudgery of this, the physical hardship of this, is significant. So I think we want to work with the communities to identify solutions that both reduce drudgery but also increase livelihood opportunities. And if you can find some of those, then you can see opportunities to diversify the types of income generation that people engage in, to improve them, to improve the quality of their lives in their homes and beyond their homes.
Yeah, and this is the whole thing about females particularly are having to do this kind of work. They're the ones that are going out and scavenging, for wood or anything they can burn, goes into the household, and also for water, because this is something I think the average walk is about 2 miles, one way out, 2 miles back, and then they're not in school. So looking at the gender issue and then taking it down to the youth level, the drudgery, the hard physical work they have to go through. I was raised on a ranch, so from 5 to 8 years old, we were learning how to drive tractors, chase cattle, and ride horses, and do all those things. And fortunately, we survived. But in many of these communities, not only do you have the women, the young girls doing these things, but also in the areas where you have war, you have rape, and you have all these things as child slavery and things. So how do you deal with that so that not only the women are seeing a benefit to this, but going all the way down to the young female youth that are living in these households?
Well, I think if you begin to find solutions that address drudgery, you'll find that less people are exposed to drudgery and less people have to do it. There are some really simple solutions: basic infrastructure, lighting, rural electrification, pumps, water pumps. There are ways that you can devise interventions working with the communities that could significantly change the amount of time that women and children spend in these activities, freeing that time up for education, freeing that time up for leisure even. So I think it's about working with communities to identify what solutions are possible, but it's also about supporting communities to make claims on the duty bearers, on the institutions around them that either provide or have failed to provide some of the infrastructure they need. I think in the context of war, you add a whole other set of insecurities and challenges, but also in the context of sort of great environmental stress, where you've got deforestation, where you've got desertification, where you've got saltwater infiltration of people's, irrigation and their wells. This is where we have to think creatively and collectively. This isn't a problem that is only for those who are experiencing it in some remote part of the globe. We are all collectively responsible for this and need to work towards improving it.
Yeah, and with your accent, we know you're from somewhere, the UK, of course, but somewhere from Europe, and you have millions that are fleeing these areas, the very places that you're talking about, because there's no way to sustain themselves. And that's not only just, for the females in the side, it's just anyone being able to sustain themselves in these particularly more rural areas, but many of these more shanty towns and other places where there's not that opportunity for employment and all that. So looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, what are they? And then looking at that, how does the work that you're doing through your organization go through to address those, highlight it so that people understand what they really are, and then what is the impacts so that we start to get at these and keep people in place so they're not having to migrate or not having to flee as either internal refugees or cross borders.
Right. Well, the Sustainable Development Goals are the follow-on.
You have to do this quickly. We only have about a minute and a half.
Okay, they're the follow-on to the MDGs, which was the Millennium Development Goals. This is a set of goals and targets that member states of the United Nations have signed on to address poverty and inequality in various manifestations, to provide decent work, to address climate change. There are 17 goals and various associated targets. We, as the International Center for Research on Women, mostly work on gender equality issues. So we focus very much on Goal 5, which is about gender equality. And we think that sustainable energy solutions that are driven by communities are a big part of reducing poverty, reducing drudgery, and improving the well-being of women and their families around the world. So we think that it will contribute significantly.
20 seconds. Where do you see your organization being in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I hope working more closely and in lockstep with more community organizations that are demanding change.
Fantastic. This is Sarah Gammage. She is the Director of Gender, Economic Empowerment and Livelihoods, International Center for Research on Women, ICRW. And thank you for being with us and talking about this, because we need to see how we take care of now the majority, over 50% of the world, as we create the Emerald Planet.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and of course the people are making a difference around the globe as we go through the 21st century. In a 21st century that looks like we'll have 9 billion people on the planet by 2050, and possibly by the end of this century, maybe 12 to 13 billion people. So how we're going to provide everything that's needed, not only for people to exist, but actually to have a higher quality of life. And the lady that's sitting right beside me, that is actually her work. This is Allie Glinski. She is the Gender and Evaluation Specialist for what's called the International Center for Research on Women. Mm-hmm. That's a great name that you have there, your own personally, but also the fact of who you're working with. Mm-hmm. But looking at research in this, you don't hear too many organizations. They do lots of things, help millions of people, but not often do you hear research in the actually name of the organization. So why this focus of research in this organization that you're a part of?
Sure. Well, as Sarah mentioned, I think at ICRW, we believe in using evidence to fuel action. So before implementing any programs or providing any recommendations, we want to understand what are the challenges that women and girls face in developing countries, what are the barriers they're facing, what solutions are they looking for, what's worked in the past, and then we use that information to inform programs and policies.
Yeah, looking at that, we're going to look at a short video here. It's by a group called Solar Sister. Mm-hmm. I love that name, and of course we've been trying to find some solar brothers to go along with this. So if we can go ahead and bring up this video, and this is going to talk about many of these issues, but not only just involving women, but also as far as entrepreneurship, creating businesses and all that.
Mimi, Valentina, ni mjasiriamali wa Solar Sister. Nafanya kazi katika kijiji cha Haydom, kata ya Haydom, wilaya Mbulu, mkoa wa Manyara, na mimi ni mkunga wa jadi, na mimi ninashughulika na masuala ya SACCOS, masuala ya kuweka na kukopa. Pia ni mhudumu wa afya, pia ni mtoa elimu kwa jamii kuhusu na masuala ya kujikinga na HIV. Kwa shughuli zote hizi nafanya kwa kujipanga. Jamii inatambua kwanza kwa sababu jinsi tunavyowachukulia, tunaonyesha upendo, tunawajali na kutoa elimu pia. Na kwa kuwa tunaishi na jamii hiyo hiyo, basi wanaona kwamba wanatuhitaji na sisi tunatoa kazi ambayo ni muhimu na tunajitoa kwao. Mwanamke anatakiwa awe jasiri kwa sababu mila na desturi ya kwetu inamfanya mwanamke atakiwe kuwa jasiri wa kujiamini, kutunza kila kitu pamoja na mzee, pamoja na familia, pamoja na ng'ombe na shamba na kila kitu, na kutunza pesa pia. Unawasaidia na kuwapa elimu na kuwasaidia pia namna ya kuishi vizuri, kwa sababu mwanamke asipokuwepo nyumbani familia inaondoka. Kabla sijaenda kwenye Solar Sister, ninapenda kutoa elimu pia kwa kina mama kuhusu masuala ya afya, kuhusu mazingira. Na mojawapo ninatoa elimu kuhusu sola, kwamba inatumia jua na jua inakuja kila siku, hasa katika eneo hii jua iko masaa yote. Kwa hiyo sola ni nzuri zaidi, itapunguza gharama kwa matumizi ya mafuta ya taa, kwa sababu kazi za ukunga mtu unafuatwa wakati wowote, na wakati unapofuatwa mara pengine ni usiku. Tulitumia zamani hizi simu kabla ya solar system kuingia hapa. Kwa hiyo tulitumia simu, na wakati unatumia simu mama aliweza kung'ata. Nikamwambia ni vibaya. Kuna sola hii hapa unaweza kutumia ikasaidia kwa sababu ina mwanga mkubwa. Hivyo waliweza kunielewa. Licha ya wakunga, kila mtu anaelewa kwamba sola inasaidia na inamfanya mama awe na uhakika wa mwanga usiku. Kwa kweli nikifika nikikuta nyumba yenye sola, mimi najisikia vizuri, naona jamii inakubali kubadilika na wanatumia sola kwa matumizi ya nyumbani.
Looking at this is really exciting that you're spreading this all across the African continent, all 54 countries. How would you explain Solar Sister, and also what do you see as the real long-term impact of an organization like Solar Sister on the quality of living, but also education, healthcare, and all these other issues that you're very much concerned about through your organization?
So Solar Sister is a social enterprise. They're based in Kampala, Uganda, but have operations throughout Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Nigeria. And the way they work is they recruit networks of female sales agents to sell clean energy products in rural areas, primarily solar lanterns and energy efficient cook stoves. And so they say they use a model similar to Avon Makeup, where they recruit a woman who's a leader in her village, and then she'll recruit other women to help sell the products. And the reason this model works, or the reason they've chosen this model, is because these women can then sell through their naturally existing social networks. They're able to develop trusting relationships with customers, and they're able to reach households that are located in very difficult to reach locations.
Yeah, now looking at the work that you're doing as far as gender and evaluation, this is something that's very important to you, but also to have hard evidence that these actual activities, but also creating these small businesses are really working. So what did you find out as far as the research that you came up with and looking at the work of Solar Sister?
Definitely. So ICRW recently did a qualitative assessment of Solar Sister's model, and we were primarily interested in the impacts on the entrepreneurs, so looking at how their lives had changed. But then we also looked at the impacts on the customers from the use of the products. And so I'll talk about a few of the most interesting impacts that we found. Among the entrepreneurs, of course, they earned income from the sales of the clean energy products. But as they earned this income, they were able to contribute more to household earnings and expenditures, which gave them increased autonomy and even participation in decision making. And so at ICRW, this is something we found is really key to empowerment, women's role in household decision making. And one quote that a woman shared that I think sums this up well is, "Before I was waiting in my house for my husband to buy things, and now I can buy whatever I want." And so you can imagine the power that a shift like that has. We also found that women gained communication skills. So as a sales agent, they're going out, they're negotiating, they're talking with people they normally wouldn't interact with. So it really enhanced their communication that they could apply to other aspects of their lives as well.
It's really interesting, the cities that you're working at, because about half of these, I was actually there this last year.
Oh, really?
And we'll be going back into some of these areas because this is in Tanzania, and we're working on the malaria eradication through a very special program that they have there. So this is really a great area that you're working at. But looking at this individual, family, and community level, this is the findings. Tell us very quickly, because people are not going to be able to read all this on the chart, but the impacts actually are very real and also very important. So just kind of walk us through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, at the individual level, kind of where I was starting before around the income and autonomy, the communication was at the individual and family level. So it's kind of influencing the way that women interact with their families. At the community level, women talked a lot about mobility and status. So as they were moving around in their community and actually just being seen as moving around, selling, that really changed the way that they were viewed. And something that we found particularly interesting is that often female entrepreneurs in developing countries are selling products like handicrafts, fruits and vegetables. But in the case case of Solar Sister, the product they were selling was an innovative technology product. So this is a very rare role for a woman to be in. So the fact that these women were being ambassadors of this new innovative energy technology really changed the way that other people viewed them and also the way they viewed themselves. So there was that big shift in status and kind of social status that they experienced.
But going to the community level, this is something that's really important because what you're doing is you're bringing new advanced technologies into the area. So one, you're increasing the status as far as the women are concerned, and that is really passed on to the children within their families. You come from that family that has the lighting and then maybe even later on refrigeration and cooking and those kinds of things. But also it just allows people to realize that we may be in the center of Tanzania, but at the same time, you know, we can actually have the advanced technologies that many people in even more advanced countries do not have access to. So that's something that's really important. So looking at some of these images we have here, you provided some very convincing photographs. So just tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here and how what they're doing, Solar Sister, is impacting the real impacts in their lives.
Sure. So I think some of the photos we provided are actually related to kind of how they were using the solar lanterns. There's a great example. So the women talked about whether they were entrepreneurs or customers, they often had the products themselves, so they were users. And they would use the products to continue running their businesses later in the evening. So they talked a lot about kind of income generation and safety that comes with using the lights at night. This is a picture the woman is taking care of her livestock at night using the solar lantern. They also talked about even the safety of going to the bathroom. So if you have to travel far to go to a latrine, the fact that you can use that light makes you feel more safe. Also, children are able to study at night. A lot of women talked about that being an important aspect they felt from the use of the solar lantern.
This is something we don't really think about in the developed world, is how many people really do live in darkness. The sun goes down until, you know, the sun rises the next day, you know, everything really stops. When you look at this photograph here, you see how they're really engaged, but it's not just, you know, the youth that are engaged, but it's the adults that are learning, and they're actually gaining from the children as far as, and this goes back to the old 4-H concept that developed in the United States back in the early 1900s, is the children actually can help to teach the adults. And so this is really just absolutely phenomenal. Where do you see your organization going over the next 5, 10, 15 years? What do you see?
So I guess we'd like to really kind of continue to build the evidence base around why it's important to engage women in clean energy value chains. We know that women are often the main cultivators and users of clean energy, and so building that case for why they should be engaged and identifying solutions of how can they most effectively be engaged.
And so through your evaluation, you feel like this is something you're getting at, you can quantify it, and then give this over to whoever needs it as far as this is really happening.
Yeah, I think it was kind of one of those first steps. This was a qualitative assessment, and we would love to continue doing more.
Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
This is firstgov.gov, where we're obsessed with getting you government information.
Brand new student loan applications on the site, baby. This calls for a celebration. Where's your uncle?
So in the end, it was either take the astronaut gig or come work here. What can I say? Duty called.
Dude, that's my cop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that's Sam's cop.
Oh, sorry?
Yeah. No. Sam's? No.
Just log on or email us and get what you need.
C, change of address form. That's how it's done.
D, driver's license renewal.
E, emailing Social Security information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice, we'll allow it. All right, Ed.
What are those?
Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time.
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
Oh, what have we got here? Sometimes you feel tired. You can't seem to lose those extra pounds off your midsection. And your joints hurt when you take the stairs. Well, you're getting older. But I'm happy to say that there's some simple things we can do to keep you happy and healthy for years to come. We can also lower your risk for some serious diseases the older population is often subject to. Proper nutrition is more important than ever. Your body has changed, you know. Not as many treats. A basic exercise plan, lots of walks and fresh air, and most importantly, come and see me for twice-yearly checkups to help ensure the best possible quality of life. Now, how does that sound? Good boy.
Improve the quality of life for your elderly pet. Schedule twice-yearly checkups that include preventive care and regular lab work. A message from the veterinary members of the American Animal Hospital Association.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis as we're looking around the globe for those organizations that are making a difference in the emerging world and in these what they call emerging market nations, working and focusing on youth and also women, and how that we're bringing more business, entrepreneurship, education, healthcare, all this into these local communities, but allowing the communities to have the pride that they're actually doing this themselves. It's not something that's being imposed from the outside. They request, and at the same time is that they learn how to use this and become leaders with their own communities. And I have a gentleman who is doing great work on the continent of Africa. This is Darren Tipton. He's the CEO and founder of what's called Project Humanity. He's coming in by Skype. And Darren, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV. Oh, okay. We need to get his sound up there. Darren?
Can you hear me now?
We got you. Thank you.
All right.
You got a great voice, so we don't want to lose it.
Thank you.
Anyway,
thanks for having me on the program.
No, thank you for being with us, and you're doing really outstanding work. Tell our domestic and international viewers a little bit about your organization called Project Humanity, and tell us how you came up with that name, because you're the founder, so you certainly should know.
Thank you for asking. To answer your question, how did I come up with the name Project Humanity? I was driving down the street one day, and it came to my mind. I asked a colleague to go and see if the website was available, and it's not a real elaborate story, but that's how it came to be. We are an NGO focused, as you said, in working in Africa right now, the country of Kenya. So that's where we're working.
And you're talking about where you're working, but tell us a little bit about Kenya, the country of Kenya, you know, where it is for some of our people that may have been a long time since they had their geography lesson. And then what region of the country are you in? Because I've been to Kenya a number of times, but I actually haven't been to the locality where you're actually doing your work.
Sure. So Kenya is in East Africa. Right on the equator, and we are working in very rural western Kenya. So if you can picture Kenya and Uganda, we're literally a mile from the Ugandan border on Lake Victoria, and it's 3 small islands that we work on there. Our primary location is Rusinga Island.
Yeah, and I actually, as I was telling you earlier, actually set up the Sister City program with Roanoke, Virginia, and Kisumu, Kenya, which you should know well because of the location where you're working. And that really is quite different, that whole region in there, than the Rift Valley area, which is the central part of the country, and then, of course, the east, which is going towards the seacoast. So tell us a little bit of the differences that you see among the people there and also the geography and terrain.
Sure. So, I think you mentioned it. The east is the seacoast, and then Nairobi's kind of mid-central to the country. And then the Rift Valley, which actually spans a couple thousand miles and has got a rich history of its own. But you come from Nairobi through the Rift Valley, through the tea lands where they grow a lot of the good Kenyan tea. And then you make it to a very arid area. Rusinga Island and the 3 islands we're on are arid. So the people there are very warm. Obviously, it's very tribal in Kenya, and the tribe that we work with predominantly is the Lua tribe. But they are, characteristically, they are warm and welcoming and very hospitable, much like you would expect. They do have rich tradition, a lot of the African tradition. But the area you work on is what I would use the word safe and warm.
That's fantastic. There's 3 primary programs that you focus on through Project Humanity and really leading to women's empowerment. So one, let's talk about those 3 programs, but why really the focus as far as the females of these various families within these communities?
I like both questions. I like to use the term healthy, wealthy, and wise. So we focus on women because they are the core of the community. They're the ones who bear the children. They're the ones out working. They're the ones carrying a lot of the burden. And so the 3 areas are health, prenatal health, and healthy deliveries, and women's health, including the transmission of HIV from mom to child, which we can deal with. Literacy, when a woman knows how to read, she knows how to do bookkeeping, she knows how to get her kids and feels it's important to get her children in school. And then really the key component here is how do they make a living for their need to eat and provide for their family. So I use the term healthy, wealthy, and wise. And when you've addressed those 3 needs, you have provided a climate, and if you want to use the word empowered, you've empowered women to do the things most critical to life.
And one of the things in your charter and mission and goals is really emphasis on international volunteerism. And of course, we know that the United States really is a world leader as far as volunteerism and people getting involved in their own communities. But you're leveraging this and taking it to a very remote area within Kenya, which many people would think it's actually remote within itself. So looking at these 3 programs that you have, how are you involving the international volunteerism, and why do you make that a cornerstone of your organization?
I answer it very simply, and it seem too simple, that the heart of a volunteer, the passion that comes with that, the experience, the training, that is, the impact is immeasurable, the opportunity is immeasurable. And I call it the secret sauce. It's the secret sauce to our success, that we are a very grassroots-driven organization, and we focus in those 3 areas we just talked about by bringing skilled professionals, college students, and it's, as you know, you've traveled quite a bit, and it's an education to be in another culture, hear the different languages, see different cultures and customs. But more than that, there's a certain element of being neighborly that seems to lack in our world. So to be clear, I very much see this as being neighbors. Yeah, I have a flushing toilet and they may not. I have running water, they may not. It doesn't make my situation better or worse. It's just that when you take volunteers, people with good intentions and goodwill, to go somewhere and stand beside people who want to grow, want to learn, and can identify key things they want to accomplish in their community, the sky's the limit.
I tell you, I think it's just fantastic, absolutely, what you're doing. What are some of the major challenges? We talked about, the flushing toilets and running water. We see this area is very dry and arid, and so that's a real issue as far as agriculture and people being able to feed themselves. So what are some of the challenges that you're faced with, and how do you think that being an international NGO like yours, that this is really important that you actually be there beyond just being neighborly and friendly, but how getting to the core of what these people really need and actually what they want to have?
Well, I think you said it, get to the core of what they need and what they need to survive in a successful way. So obviously clean water is a huge challenge. There's lots of potential, and a lot of times a little bit of education with a lot of potential goes a very long ways. So for example, helping the women come together and create, we call them SACOs, which is basically formally organized business groups, and start rotating savings and credit where each person is contributing $1. Over the time, we match that with a grant. and they can borrow against this. Now, the challenge is there's not money to start new businesses. There's not money to do business. If you teach them to save, teach them to budget, teach them to, basic business practices, which we can, and then you provide a little bit of microfinancing, they suddenly have a mechanism that they can do business, that they can make money to send the kids to school. So their challenges are very much like ours: clean water, a way to grow food in an arid place, a way to do business so that they can provide for their families. And so it's interesting when you combine a little bit of standing with someone and the idea that these challenges can be met when you stand together.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to this slide we just had up there as far as the children concerned in school, because this gives our viewers, both domestically and internationally, what these children are willing to go through in order to have an education, and why it's even so important that they actually do have an education. What defines success as far as your organization, Project Humanity?
This is a great idea, and there's so much focus on measuring impact for NGOs, and it has to be there. And I have to answer it two ways, because we've identified kind of a two-tier approach to work, and that is, what's the success in taking a humanitarian volunteer? One is that they go, they have an amazing experience, they see what happens when you work together in a different community, in a far away place like Africa or Kenya. But then they come home, the success is they come home, they engage in a Rotary Club, or they engage in civic or service organizations in their own town, or a church. A lot of churches do outreach. So that would be, to me, part of the measurable success. What'd you do when you left? And I think locally it's seeing when you drive off each time and you look in your rearview mirror to say, okay, a year ago this wasn't happening, and we're leaving now, our staff stays, but there's still work continuing that they've owned, and they are growing new businesses, they're growing new opportunities, they're putting their kids in school, that type of thing. So I think there's those measurements we make very scientifically, but then there's also the, what's going on when we leave.
Yeah, looking at this, and I'm going to come up with the logo here for your organization, but what are people taking with them, the volunteers, when they leave, and what are they leaving behind in these communities? And I think I have an idea of some of what you're going to say, but I'm going to let you do that.
All right. I am not a big fan of the stop, drop, and roll. In other words, pull up, drop 8 off, and then roll out. So they are bringing their hearts. All of us who are doing this type of work were influenced at some time or another by a mentor, somebody who had made a big difference in our life, encouraged us, challenged us. And it goes back to the basic fundamental of being human. What does it mean to care for others? It's not bringing your old used clothes or items to drop off, and we do bring some things that we give to the people. But I think it's being cognizant of the fact that help starts in the heart.
And I knew that was exactly what you were going to answer, but I wanted you to share that, because you're taking your heart and you're leaving your heart, but also you're bringing back the hearts of the people that you're working with in Kenya and Africa. Darren Tipton, CEO, founder, Project Humanity, as we create.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and Director and host for the Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a regular basis, week to week, and looking around the globe in 144 different countries, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And of course, we're looking for the leaders that are helping to bring about change within communities that are challenged, whether it's within the United States or the 213 other countries and territories around the globe that we reach through the Emerald Planet TV. And we have a gentleman who's working very diligently on the continent of Africa, specifically in Kenya. This is Darren up to Tipton. He is the CEO and founder of Project Humanity. And Darren's coming to us by Skype. Darren, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
I'm glad to have you with us. I know that we talked a little earlier about Project Humanity. You have these three main areas that you emphasize. I'm going to have you share those again if you don't mind. But really, I think one of the cornerstones is this international volunteerism. And it's very unique, I think, even though that many NGOs really do need to have volunteers in order to operate and be viable. But at the same time, it's very important to talk about why you see this really as a cornerstone as far as your organization. And just share a little bit about that, the three areas, and then tying in the volunteerism.
Sure. So I like to call it healthy, wealthy, and wise, that there are, when you're dealing with empowerment, in this case, empowering being bettering people's lives, giving them tools. You're dealing with literacy, healthcare, and you're dealing with education and micro-business. So I am excited when a volunteer agrees to come and serve with us and they return home after a trip and they say, because of my work with Project Humanity, because you nurtured a passion, a desire in my life to do something great for people, to stand with people, that they come home, they get engaged in a Rotary Club, a service organization, church group. So two prongs, one being the actual work in Africa that our staff does while we're not there, but then there's a lot of friendship and goodwill. To be frank with you, something our world needs today, and that's a lot of friendship building and sharing of ideas and skills and talent. So the two complement each other very well, and they have equal weight with our organization.
And this whole thing about the strife that's going on around the globe, the mass migration, was 60 million refugees, either internal or international now across the globe. And really much of what you're doing, Darren, is to allow people to flourish in place, and so they don't have to move. But looking at this photograph right here, I wanted to bring this up. Tell us a little bit about Kenya, why you chose Kenya, and what is unique about Kenya as far as the African continent is concerned, and how that Project Humanity works, and why it works so well.
I would say Kenya is a very interesting place. It's geographically in East Africa, just right on the the middle of Africa, and it's got diverse topography. You've got, like I said earlier, Nairobi, through the Rift Valley, which is a very stretch of kind of dry, arid land, and then through the T region, and then out to Rusinga Island, where we're working, and the islands on Lake Victoria. We're just a mile from Uganda, so it gives you a little bit of perspective as far as geography. The people of Kenya, to me, is the brilliant masterpiece of why we're there, and that is they are warm. They are very tribal, of course, if you study the history and have opportunity to do that. But they are warm, they're motivated, especially the younger people want opportunity, they're seeking opportunity. And so for us, it presents a very unique opportunity to come and stand with leaders of the community, ask questions such as, what would you want your community to do? How do you want the story of your community to be better? Listen for the answers, and then identify how any of those answers fall within those three key areas: healthy, wealthy, and wise, for our women's empowerment program. So I guess the reason we chose it is it's just a beautiful place, and it's great to take volunteers to.
Yeah, I've been in Kenya and traveled across the country, and the people are very warm. And they work very hard. Many people have perceptions of various countries in Africa, but the people are hardworking. They want to learn, and you just give them an opportunity, and they'll just absorb every bit of knowledge and technology that's absolutely out there. How are you being received as far as the work you're doing through Project Humanity? And then why is there still a need for international NGOs? Because Kenya really is looked upon as being almost a middle income state where it's elevated itself, it's modernized, there's manufacturing, you have high-end retail, you have all this going on. So why an international NGO still needs to be involved in the country of Kenya?
This is a great question. To answer your first question, how are we received? There's a principle I live by, and to have good neighbors, you have to be a good neighbor. And I think anytime you approach people out of respect and you come to them and say, we're just a group of people who want to help where we can, we want to stand with you where it's appropriate, and you respect each other. It's not the people of the world who can't get along. We can get along. And when you approach people out of that very the idea of friendship, you won't have a problem being received, and we haven't. We've built relationships over time. If you say you'll do something, do it. I love that aspect of how it translates to any culture. I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I shared with you, I helped set up the International Sister City program with Kisumu, Kenya, which is in the same general area, Lake Victoria. And we really emphasize the technical assistance and technical exchanges. So every 6 months, we had a technical delegation either going into Kisumu or one coming from Kisumu and going into Southwest Virginia here in the United States. So looking at that, what are some of the best practices that you've actually gained from this experience working with this particular community, but also this region in Kenya, that other NGOs, but even communities within the United States could benefit from?
I appreciate the question. I find a couple things in the last few years that we've discovered, and again, it goes back to respect. Respect the people you're working with. Don't assume you know what they need. Protect your passion. We are very much a grassroots organization. Our volunteer leaders have passion, and if you have healthy boundaries, in other words, the tendency is for givers, people who like to help and be available to help, they want to go and they give the shirt off their back. You have to have good boundaries for your organization, for your volunteers, for your local staff. And so those best practices come because you've learned, maybe through some hardships at times, how you shouldn't do it. But obviously the best practices as far as reporting out to your donors, reporting out to those who are supporting your programs. But I think the biggest thing is have heart and respect people where they are.
You know, looking at sustainability, this is one of the key phrases as far as any development project, and of course resiliency is another one that you and I haven't necessarily talked about, but it's all part of the sustainability aspect of it. But you've really been incorporating the green aspects of this, respect for the environment as well as for the humankind that you're working with. So how do you balance this where as a NGO you're working in these areas where you're balancing the empowerment, which really goes to the heart of entrepreneurship and allowing people to create their own community in the way that they see it, but also to green these areas. So how do you do that in an area that is water challenged and also it's a very dry and arid area?
I think the very virtue of your show, how the show focuses on this aspect of green. So Lake Victoria is not only overfished, they wash their clothes in the lake, they take baths in the lake, and so you've got all this phosphorus. Education is a big part of what we do. A second aspect and a program that we're working on for the women is a program to help them discover reusable sanitary napkins. There are organizations that bring the napkins over, and it's a one-time fix, of course. And now you've got latrines and pit latrines, and you've got a landscape filled with these disposable sanitary products. And we're trying to integrate the idea that there are some reusable solutions that don't create this long-term environmental problem. And that's just a couple of things that we're doing. But as you know, places to put trash, what is appropriate to put trash and where's not. Those things can be dealt with in education and encouragement in the local community.
Well, the whole thing about it too, Darren, is that what you're talking about here, and of course there's a very fantastic program in Nairobi, and you know, one of the largest shanty towns in the world, with over 1 million people. It's called P-Pool. And for 2 US cents, you can provide sanitation for a family of 6, and in turn that can actually go into food production. It takes the waste out of the water. So there's so many of these very simple solutions, but yet you can create jobs for thousands, even tens of thousands of people. And I think that's, you know, that's really a very deep aspect of green. 2 last questions. We're running out of time, as always. Sure. But looking at why do you think people volunteer? It costs them their 3 T's, the time, the treasure, and their talents, and yet you still have many people that want to do this.
You know, we live in a social media-driven world, which creates a very interesting understanding of intimacy. I think a lot of us are driven to something more. And you've mentioned the 3 T's, but I think the last thing I would say is nothing quenches the heart like interaction with other people, and nothing quenches your thirst for service as actually doing it. So I tend to err on the side of serve with passion, give your life.
One last question, got to be quick, sure. 10 seconds. What do you see for the growth, development, next 5, 10, 15 years?
I love the idea of formulating models that we can share with other organizations 5, 10 years and continue to expand in Western Kenya.
That's absolutely fantastic. Darren Tipton is CEO, founder of Project Humanity. Thank you for Darren for being with us and sharing all this fantastic programming that you're doing, the best successes, best practices that you have. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald.